Welcome to Tablenauts. My name is Max.
I'm Doolin.
I'm Kenny.
And today we're going to talk about our first 10 to 12 hours with Oathsworn. This is a game designed by Jamie Jolly and published by Shadowborn Games. It is what I would consider to be a boss battler adventure game.
Yeah, fair.
Okay, fair enough. We have played through the first 3 chapters, and we are going to keep this video fairly spoiler-free for all of you considering backing the board game, which is out today on Kickstarter for its second printing. We have spent about 10 hours playing through the story and combat section of the first 3 chapters. Now, yes, that is barely scratching the surface of what this big box game has to offer. I believe it is made up of over 21 different scenarios, every one of which includes both a story situation, a story aspect, and then a combat, typically taking, 90 minutes each? Almost 2 to 3 hours per chapter.
Yeah.
During the story mission, you're going to be making decisions, navigating a map, and getting consequences and rewards for things that you choose. And during the combat, it is a big old boss battler where you are dropped onto a hex-based grid map, fighting whatever is thrown at you in a very interesting and unique card-driven combat system, which we're going to talk about more when we get into talking about combat specifically. First and foremost, basic thoughts. As far as, did you enjoy it? Don't get into specifics yet, but did we like it?
Yes.
We did.
Oh, man.
We all 3 liked it, right, Kenny?
It's incredible.
What if Kenny was like,
That's right.
it's fine?
Speaking of, the differences in story and boss.
Yeah, I think we should probably spend some time talking about both.
Yeah.
But
Do we want to say this now? Which of these aspects did you guys enjoy more? Which do you guys think that, I don't know.
go ahead, Kenny.
I would say the narrative stuff, the story part, I think it's just really, really well done. I think that the voice acting is just amazing. The writing itself is really, really good. I think it's some of the best writing I've seen in a board game.
Yeah.
Especially
no
a fantasy setting. It's this kind of grim, dark fantasy world that is where there's really dramatic things that happen.
Right.
Even the 3 chapters that we saw, some big things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not necessarily required to use the app. You can use the storybook, but in our opinion, the app is great. It handles things incredibly well. Like he said, the voice narration, the voice acting is great. Honestly, really adds to the experience, in my opinion. As far as which I prefer, I think that maybe if I set them aside as one and the other, I think that the narrative excels over really anything else I've ever played of this capacity. I think this narrative is better than any other board game narrative that I've experienced personally.
Yeah.
I know you have more experience with narrative board games. The combat is what I enjoyed more because that's just that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I enjoy the fighting and the card play more than I do the story. But I still very much enjoyed the story, and I think that it excels, basically, at both counts, but I think the story is just better than I ever imagined it would be, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as the story-based games I've played, this one is definitely more, obviously narrative-driven, but the idea of it being an ongoing story that you have somewhat effect over, but some things are universal, right? They automatically happen, and I feel like this game has more of that. It might be a little bit more linear than some other ones.
Yeah, a little more on rails.
Yeah. But again, I think to its credit, what it has you on rails is very engaging and really amazing to play.
And it did not feel like we were entirely on rails. I understand where you're coming from. There are moments that you make a decision and you're like, yeah, it's going to do this. And it definitely doesn't, but it seems like every decision, kind of like when you're playing D&D, typically, like you fail forwards, right? Like you may have not chosen, or you may have chosen to do something, and it did something else, but it still mattered the choice that you made. It was a different variation of what could have happened if you made another choice or something like that. So it definitely wasn't like you could swing the entire thing top to bottom, every single choice you made. There are some that are on rails, but even the ones that are on rails felt like you mattered at least.
Well, just to be different, and also because I believe it, I think that the combat is where the game at least takes that narrative base and shines incredibly well. Most narrative-based games I've played, I'm thinking of The Initiative that Emily and I both love. I'm thinking of Tainted Grail, which was a really great narrative-based game, both of which are like the narrative is what engages you. It's why you play. The combat, like the actual play, like if it was just that, it wouldn't be that much to write home about. But I actually really love the boss battling.
Yeah.
I think it's really well done and really fun to play.
To draw a comparison that I think can be drawn across multiple facets of this board game, the progression system and the way that I care about the narrative, and the narrative is tenfold better than what I'm comparing it to, but it's Gloomhaven but better in my opinion. It's not the same. I don't want to make that distinction. It's not the same. This is not Gloomhaven, but in Gloomhaven you still have that like story aspect, and then you have the combat. But in Gloomhaven it's like 90% combat, 10% story. The story is it's like a veil. I mean, it's so thin. There's not a lot to it, and this gives me that. The story is actually good and engaging, and the combat not the same, but it's like that's what I look forward to the most. Like, I'm just agreeing with your statement. Like, the combat is what gets me wanting to come back. The story is great, and I'm glad it's there, and it excels having both of them. But the combat is what like keeps me itching to come back. Unlocking new unique items, like pushing forward and getting cooler stuff. That's what keeps me wanting to come back.
That's really cool because okay, so in the same way, because I've not played Gloomhaven, but I have played Tainted Grail. The complete opposite is true of it.
Right.
Where I think that the narrative is where the huge amount of focus is, and the combat is like maybe 10% of the time you're in combat with things. And so like this is definitely more in the middle, like 50-50. So.
I do also want to say that I think it's ramped up. The combat's been great from Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Chapter 3, the combat was great. I still think Chapter 3 may have been the best combat. But the narration, the story has gotten exceedingly more interesting in the most recent chapter than it was in Chapter 1 and 2. Not to say that I didn't care about it in Chapter 1 and 2, but it felt like a traditional story. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of normal. It was still going through the paces, still going through all of it, but it was cool, whatever. And then Chapter 3 hits, you're like, oh, this is like...
Stakes got raised.
Yeah, it got raised big time. This is way more than you imagined it would have been.
Yeah.
And to me, Chapter 3, I'm glad we played it before we talked about this, because I enjoyed 1 and 2 immensely. I mean, I ranked it a 10 out of 10 on my first impressions thing that we talked about earlier. But having played the third, it just solidified that, in my opinion. I'm not going to rank it again, but like, it's
11
just...
out of 10?
Yeah, 11 out of 10, yeah. But it just solidified that like this was good, and even more than I thought it was going to be. You're probably watching this video around about when the Kickstarter is coming out, which is today. If you're seeing this on launch, it's October 18th. It might still be going on if you're seeing this video late. But if you're curious about whether you should back this or not, I'm not going to answer that question for you. I'm not going to say, yes, you should back this. Everybody's financial situation is different. Everybody's game shelf situation is different. And I personally back almost no board games. So like I can't tell you, yes, you should back this. But is this game for you? I think is something that we can maybe answer.
Absolutely.
Based off what we can compare it to and what we think it excels at and where we think it falls flat at. I think that a blanket statement for me is if you like any of those story games, I still think you're going to like this. I mean, that's like the easiest thing I can say. Like if you like Gloomhaven, if you like Tainted Grail, if you like any of those that are this like fantasy thing, I think that this is still going to do enough for you, even if it's like focused more on combat than something like Tainted Grail.
Yeah. I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, do you have the time and the people to play with for a big campaign game? Because this is
100%.
like 20 missions plus, like it's going to take a bit to get through. And like I think most campaign games, like people are really exuberant and excited about it at the beginning, and then it just falls off, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think this game has, I think we talked about it with the three of us, like I think this game we'll keep playing.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, I think it's amazing and just so well crafted. But I think that's the first good question to ask yourself. We'll actually get through more than 10% of the game. So.
Yeah. I do think that it is important to point out that you can play this game solo.
I was about to say.
They do something very cool with the companions, making the game a lot more easier to manage if you're playing solo, because you always play with 4 Oathsworn. No matter how many players you have at the table, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4, you're playing with 4 Oathsworn. But if you do not have enough people to control all 4, which in our case we have 3, so we're each controlling a full Oathsworn character and then a companion, which what that does is boils that character down into no playing cards, no utilizing the cycle, which we haven't even discussed yet, but essentially you're just spending a couple things per turn, doing a couple different things that are stronger because you get less actions. And I think that can really allow it to excel at any player count.
Yeah.
At 1, you're still going to be controlling a lot. I mean, it's going to be a lot to think about, but like it's not going to be you're playing 4 full characters. I mean, that would be. I bet some people out there are doing it. I wouldn't want to. It sounds like a lot, but I do think it's important to note that it can. I think it can work at any player count from 1 to 4.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. If you're the type of person that can't find a group, I would say that in the same way that I would recommend Tainted Grail at 1, like I think this would be a blast at 1.
Yeah.
I think especially losing yourself in that like immersion with the awesome voice acting and all of that stuff. I think that it still could be good, but I will say between the two that I've played in a couple of like I think this is probably better enjoyed with others, especially the big dice rolls.
Yeah.
Like those are always just way more fun with other people.
It is.
And
It is way more fun.
We've had such big moments too.
Yeah.
playing the game,
and that's best.
You want someone that, exactly. You want someone there to share it with you. And so I definitely agree with that. But I think it could be used, could be played and enjoyed at any player
absolutely.
count. Yeah. Let's get down into a few of the mechanics that make this game different than something else you might not have played before, you might have experience with. The one that obviously sticks out is the cycle, which I'm trying to remember what it's actually called. Battle flow.
Battle flow, yeah.
Battle flow is the mechanic. And essentially you have 3 slots, 4 slots, 3, 2, 1, or 0, and you're playing cards into those slots. And they are stuck until you get them back, essentially. And if you play a card in slot 3, and then the next turn or the next action, you play another card on top of that, then the one that was there cycles down to 2. And anytime you cycle stuff back to 0, you get all your 0 cards back at the start of your next turn. So it's just a very unique and interesting way to do card play. It's not, it reminds me kind of the same as the way that Gloomhaven has you discarding and losing cards and stuff like that, but it's by no means the same. But I really like that. It adds additional strategy, a level on top of what card makes sense to play here for the action, and also what can I get back, or how long is that going to be stuck in my battle flow? Like, when am I going to get that back? It just adds even more strategy to it.
Yeah, it reminds me of Gloomhaven. Like, I think is that, like you said, they're very different systems, but it gives me the same feeling.
Right,
like
that's all I mean when I say that.
Yeah, every decision's tough because you have to think, like, when is this actually going to activate, and when's stuff going to get back to my hand, and when do I actually need it? Like, there's a lot of decisions you have to kind of think about every time you put a card out. So
yeah, you got to really consider the timing of your actions. Like, I can play this here, but it's going to be stuck in my battle flow, and it may be a very powerful defense card. That is going to be stuck in my battle flow, and I can't use it. So it definitely is just an additional element to the strategy of this game that you might not have considered.
Yeah, and as a person who actually enjoys some luck-based stuff as well, the addition of you can use all of these cards to give you some strategical advantage, but then you still a lot of it's based on die roll. Is a lot of fun to me. I love a good dice chucker, and like the fact that one of the sides of each dice has like the crit marks on it, meaning that you get to take another of that same color dice and roll it again, and then if you roll that again, you get to take another dice and just keep stacking and stacking, and like that's come like what our last session.
Even just this chapter, we each did it at least once.
Yeah.
We each had cascading criticals, and it's so exciting.
And because of one of them, at the very end of the game, we got just to show off more of the game. There are also tokens that you can save that allow you to reroll, that allow you to add to your defense, that allow you to upgrade dice. And because I rolled poorly when I wanted to end the game, I used a reroll, rolled, got a crit, was able to get another dice, and it ended the game. And like moments like that are just what this game is filled with, and I love it.
To pivot off of that into the second thing I want to talk about is the actual choice between using cards or dice. And the game basically comes with colored dice and colored cards. And the cards are both for the Oathsworn, and then there's an entirely separate number of cards for the enemies. And it recommends you choose whichever you want for your own characters, and for the enemies, you flip the cards because it's just more predictable. So it's not necessarily, it's more fair. It's not better, worse. It's just you get an equal distribution of card numbers, and that's the same with whether you use it for your own turns. Me personally, I like the luck, excitement, and speed, I think, of using the dice. The first couple of chapters, we used dice for our own stuff, and we used cards for the enemy stuff. And this most recent chapter, we used dice for the enemy stuff. I thought it was great. I didn't notice a substantial difference in how it hurt us. It was exciting to roll the 3 blanks when we rolled them, which you can of course draw 3 blanks too. But I just prefer the speed of play when you're using dice. Cards just slow it down. It's not a big deal, but it just slows down the game, takes more time to play.
Yeah, this is our fastest game, so I'd agree.
Yeah.
It's just swingier, but I mean, it can also swing in your favor. So I think it's fine. I enjoyed it that way too.
I love it.
I also, yeah, me too. I mean, right. I also like that the game is very lenient on when you want to use that, though.
Yeah.
Like, the game tells you, like, you can roll dice and draw cards whenever you want. You could roll 2 dice and draw a card if you wanted. Like, it's really lenient in that. And I almost smacked you in the face, Draco. And I think that that's just really interesting. Like, if you've used a few cards and you know that a crit's coming up or you expect you did the math, you counted the cards, then feel free to wait until you want to use that because you think a crit's coming up. Like, it allows you to even add additional strategy on top of that in how you use the cards and dice. Me personally, I'm probably just going to use dice because it's just, to me, more fun and easier and quicker, but I like that you have the choice at the very least.
Yeah. For those of you that don't like that, which I know that there are plenty.
100%.
Like,
yeah.
There is a way to just
it's
completely
way more
that.
strategical to just use the cards, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that I think is something we can just briefly touch on, but I think it's really interesting and rewarding, and how I think that this one rule is almost exemplified in the game as a whole. And I'm gonna forget the name of it, but it's the rule where if you fail, you are rewarded with tokens. So if I fail, I can get a redraw token. If I fail and use that redraw token in the future, I get that redraw token back and an additional token. And to me personally, I just think that's such an interesting design philosophy. Like, that's what they've taken with this game is like, you fail, but you fail forwards. Yeah. You have fun while failing. You are rewarded not for failing, but like, you're given ways to mitigate it without, I don't know. I just think that that's such an interesting choice that they made that to me makes the game a lot more fun because you're at least getting something back when you fail.
The minis are amazing.
Yes.
I think like they're a bit larger than the standard scale minis you'd get. The quality of the minis is one of the best I've seen in like a board game. I like the larger size too.
Yeah.
Makes it a lot easier to paint.
I 1000% agree. So Kenny painted these 3. I've painted these 3, and I genuinely feel like these are the best miniatures I've ever painted. I don't know how to describe it other than it felt good to paint them.
We haven't even seen really the huge minis.
We have a couple of them. We have a couple that they sent us, but we don't have like the full minis version. So we're still playing with the standees and whatnot.
If you can keep it as spoiler-free as possible, describe your absolute favorite moment you've had in the game.
I mean, I think like this last one we did, chapter 3, like I think like the narrative portion, the story portion was super cool. Like,
it very well.
And I think like that paired with like just how that played off of like it wasn't super related in terms of like what happened in the boss battle versus the story, but the boss battle itself was just like brought in such cool mechanics of like how stuff played out. Like I was just super impressed. So.
I think along with that, the narrative portion of that included with the boss battle ending of the second one tells me that, being as spoiler free as possible, we might see something like it says okay, and this is the end of this, but it leaves it open ended, and it's like we might see some more. Like we don't know. I think my favorite is very like personal to me, but like this talks about some of the asymmetry of the characters and stuff. I loved the second round where I realized a certain combination of some of my cards would allow me to just be this character that never did any damage, but ran around the map and just called over to the monster.
And that was incredible.
And the monster would run to me, not get to me, and not get to attack, and like none of us died, which was nice.
Perfect.
Yeah. So like the whole time they were chasing the monster while the monster was chasing me, and it was fun to like be able to have it's not just run up, swing, then it swings. There is some strategy that you can pull to where you could be a character that doesn't even attack, and I like that about it.
I want to come back to that to pivot into something else real quick, but I'm not going to talk about my favorite moments much because they both honestly happened in this chapter, and they're very spoiler heavy. But there was one where in the story mode, we were faced with an extremely difficult decision that I would not have expected the game to throw at us. It just subverted that entirely, and it was wild and exciting and scary all at the same time. And then in the gameplay, there were just some mechanics to do with that third chapter boss that were very intriguing and different. Again, I can't tell you much about them, but I hope that you are excited about them when you see them, as I was when I saw them. To touch back on that, though, I do think that some of the best moments in this game come from finding cool card combos or how your characters work together. And I think that I have been a bit ambitious and not been able to discover as much about my characters as you have, because I've played 3 characters in chapter 1, 2, and 3. I've used a different character for every combat. So I'm not adding stuff in and seeing how it works. I'm just kind of having fun messing around with new characters.
Max's choice. The game did not force
Yes,
that
the game did not force that on me. I just chose to try different characters out. Even on this third chapter where I was playing with the Blade, who is not in front of us because he's not painted, there was an incredibly cool moment where no spoilers because it's the cards, but I somersaulted over an enemy and then did a spinning slash attack that hit 2 enemies, and like that stuff was just awesome. Like you feel so cool when you're able to pull attacks off like that off. And I want to pivot that into the fact that these characters are just all wildly different in a very good way. I've played with the Avi Harbinger, I've played with the Warbear, and I've played with the Exile. And you two have stuck with your Priest and Kerr.
You mean the Blade, right?
The Blade, not the Exile. You're right. This is the Exile. The Blade is what I mean. But so you've been able to kind of like lean into them and figure out how they work, whereas I've kind of been bouncing around. But it's allowed me to at least see 3 different characters that work wildly different than the other. Some very complex, some very not complex. Like the Warbear is very simple to use but effective, and something like the Blade and the Witch are very difficult to use but extremely effective if you're able to use them. But have you found any exciting things from playing your particular characters over the span of 3 chapters?
Mine's very reactionary, I think, which is it's fun to me. I love playing like a support character, and this character, like the Priest, allows me to really lean into that well. I can stand near friends and try to protect them, or I can just take like the aggro and be far away and like the enemy never get to me, and so like definitely using the board space is something that I thought has been heavy with me. Like is making sure, okay, if they're here, I need to make sure I'm well over here, and then I need to watch out because I don't need to bring them too close to my friends, or like we even had like some extra like people
allies
on the board, and I needed to protect them. So like I don't know. I love the management of the board system on that.
Yeah, so like, and the Kerr is kind of like the rogue, like a typical like fantasy rogue. So like, and I think like they're big damage output, but it also does like really unexpected things, like where you can almost like figure out defensively change priority of targets, stuff like that. Like it's kind of subverts some of the things I would expect out of a rogue class. So usually I just think, I was really focusing on positioning and doing a lot of damage, but you have a lot of tools in your arsenal to do a lot of cool things.
Yeah.
So
If you like backstabbing.
yeah. Well, that's bread and butter right there.
All right, now that we've gone through some of the specific things we wanted to talk about, let's just jump into final thoughts after 3 chapters. And I know we did mention it briefly, but we discussed, like, we don't want to give up on this game. This is our video for the game. They sent us the game. We're covering the game, so you can be interested in the Kickstarter. But we continue to want to get back to this. You might see more coverage on it in the future. This game is freaking awesome.
I did do the math.
Yeah.
Like if there's 21 chapters and we've done 3 in 10 hours, that means it's going to be a 70+ hour video again.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. But final thoughts after our 10 hours so far with Oathsworn, and really, it's 30 hours if you look at it that way. It's 3 different people, all spending 10 hours each, all having different experiences on it. I'm just saying, the title could say 30 hours into Oathsworn. If you like this kind of game and are a person who backs board games, I definitely think you should do this one. I mean, I've played Gloomhaven, I've played Kingdom Death Monster, I've played this now, anything along those lines, and this is probably the best mesh of story and combat to me. This is a really, really excellent game that I could see me doing actually all 21 chapters of, and just feeling like pleased. Just I did it and I'm done, and it's a concise experience. And as far as I'm aware, Shadowborn has said that this is Oathsworn. As far as I'm aware, there are no expansions coming to Oathsworn to add anything to the actual like length of the game or stories or encounters, and there will just be sequels. But this is Oathsworn.
Yeah.
And I think that you're getting a full product that is, at least from what we've seen so far, excellent in story, in combat. If you're a miniature painter, it's got that going for you too. I mean, I'll say I'm still ranking it a 10 out of 10, I think, and I'll shut up and let you guys talk.
I think for like these big fantasy campaign games, this is like the best I've played. Like in that even includes like Gloomhaven. Like,
Yeah.
I've played Gloomhaven all the way through, but I think this one's just like so engaging in terms of like the narrative meets the combat.
100%. I said I'd shut up, sorry.
If you're to back it or not is, do you think you have the group for a campaign game, and do you think it's a game you can actually see all the way through? I think Oathsworn's has an advantage because like it is 20-ish scenarios, so like that's much more obtainable than like something like a Gloomhaven, which is like 50, 60. Not to like rag on Gloomhaven, but it's just like this is like I think it's like a doable length, right? In terms of what a board game group can get through. So I think that's like an extra win in the column. So
Yeah. For me, my natural tendency and my want is to compare it to a game we've mentioned a million times, Saint Grail. And it's hard for me because I've played a lot more of that game. But that being said, I think that this stacks itself up well with it. If you like one, you're going to like the other. I think that this one, if I have to say something about it that is completely like different in terms of if you're comparing the two or worried about one or the other, this one's more accessible. I think that the story is, I mean, you could put it on a TV with your group and like just get really into it, be eating snacks while like the things are being read, and then as a group, like the biggest choices you have is saying yes or no to something. Like that's all you have to do. And then the
Or
combat,
this or that.
this or that type of thing. And so like it's very, it's almost like a TV show. Like you're sitting and you're listening to this beautiful story being read by a handsome dude from Game of Thrones, and I don't know.
Jorah Mormont?
Yeah. And it's just very engaging, and then you play this incredibly fun boss battle. So I do definitely think, even though I would say this is at least a medium weight game, it's extremely accessible. If you're looking at getting a group of people to the table for their very first like big campaign together, I definitely think this could be it. I think that it's entirely possible, and you would surprise some people when it comes to what a board game is capable of if you were to bring them in for this as their first campaign game, and I think they would love it. So that's my thought.
Yeah. Anything else?
I hated it. No.
Okay.
If at some point, like 40 hours in, they're both like, I'm done with it, I'm at least going to finish it. I'm going to make that commitment right now. It's happening. He did not like that idea.
Remy did not agree with you doing it without us. This is a group effort, Doolin. We all want to complete this.
I'm just saying, I want to see the end. I want to know where the story goes. I want to know like if they bring things back that they're dropping on it. Like
I still got to cycle through all the other characters. We still got a long time to go.
Yeah, this is like the first campaign game. Like, I'm just as interested to not only play the game or the next mission, but to see where the story goes. And I think that's really, I have not really experienced that.
I don't think I have either. No. Yeah, I really don't. I think this is the first one that's compelled me in both story and combat to push me forward.
If I were to rank it on the scale that Cold Stone gives us, it's a love it. Or not. Actually,
gotta have it.
Gotta have it. Is where I rank it.
Anyone who doesn't have a Cold Stone is like, what? We'll see y'all next time for our. How many hours you say it was going to be again?
That's not going to be the next video, but like, please come back before then.
Yeah. No, sorry. Tablenauts is not posting videos for the next year and a half. We'll come back when Oathsworn review is ready. Okay, we'll see you then.